Welcome back. This time I want to talk about the minerals deal signed by Zelensky. And yes, Zelensky might have made a huge mistake by signing Trump's mineral and energy deal, because the only way that deal can work for Trump and for investors, the only way capitals may take the risk of going to a war zone is if Russia keeps up on Ukraine with or without territorial concessions, and serious guarantees are given to make that possible. And the only way I see to make that possible is through European Union and NATO membership, or if Ukraine is destabilized and turned into another Belarus, and sanctions are lifted, of course, as a consequence of that peace. Peace. And that's exactly this second option is to what Trump's ceasefire is pointing to, right? So, which one do you think is more likely? Which scenario do you think is more likely? Besides, for those who are saying, well, but the exploitation may take decades, at least 1 decade, even in times of peace. Yes, the exploitation, but the effects on the stocks of those who are of the companies who are going to benefit from the exploitation, no, those those stock prices are going to raise from day one. And who is going to benefit from that? The executives who are benefited from participating in Trump's enterprise. So think better. Therefore, security is a must for the project to be fruitful. Fairness to Ukraine or Europe or to American interests is not. Remember the Russian attacks on Zaporizhia nuclear plant on March 4, 2022? Yeah. So obviously, Trump and those who have been behind this mineral deal know that that mineral deal is of little value unless there is some peace and stability, even if it's an unfair peace, even if it's a peace like the peace Chechnya got after the Second Chechen War. And as I have mentioned a moment ago, the project may take years to develop, but if the reserves are promising, as in oil, and Ukraine is submitted, the prices of the stocks of the companies who are going to get the licenses are going to rise right away, making very rich the executives who are rewarded with those stocks. So, yes, this is a bad decision that puts a target on Zelensky's back, unless it's just a tactic to gain time. So, let's explore, with this in consideration, a few additional details about this deal. Number one, a common mistake made in the West, as noted by Jack Watling, is to ignore the connection between the issues of Russia and China, which is particularly dangerous if we consider how addicted Russia's economy is to the war, as Hitler's was in his time, and even more dangerous because the mineral deal is more likely to succeed if Zelensky is out of the way, and American capitals in energy can go back to Russia as a result of sanctions lifting, because this would elevate the Putin inside the yuan zone, inside China zone. So the question worth asking is, what could Europe do if that happens? And the same capitals that are behind the American LNG sold to Europe to replace Russian gas stop selling to that LNG to Europe because it's more profitable to sell them gas through Nord Stream. This is even more threatening because there is no other country in conditions to replace the American supply of LNG. Qatar is far away supplier in the ranking of suppliers, and as mentioned in another video, the negotiations with Qatar are frozen. What could happen? What would this mean in terms of what could this mean in terms of energy security for Europe? Macron, Merz, and above all, Starmer have to smart up before they end up regretting an outcome they are not going to like. And it's true that this mineral deal is much less mean than the one Trump wanted to impose on Zelensky in February. For instance, Ukraine will retain control over his infrastructure and resources, and the deal will not foreclose European Union membership. Notice that the February plan not only counted as American contributions to the so-created investment fund, the military aid provided as grants during the Biden era, uh, during the Biden administration, but still it's not clear whether Zelensky will be able to use it as an ATM, getting as much war materials when he needs them, or if Trump can dosify the military aid to help Russia, as Biden rationed military aid to Ukraine in 2023, hurting the 2023 counteroffensive. What gave Ukraine enough to survive but not to win? In other words, what if Ukraine wants to launch a counteroffensive and then they in 2025 and they found that Trump won't give them enough war materials under any excuse, and they are trapped in just a deal that will give them enough to survive but not to win, while their resources are extracted and reaching other people anyway. Also, the February proposal gave rights to USA investors through the USA government over Ukraine's resources and infrastructure, all this while opening a path to refund Russia's $226 billion in reserves in European banks, which the West was too timid to seize when it has the chance for years, for at least 2 years. And you must remember how many times I have quoted the 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 legal opinion of Lawrence Tribe. How many times both Europe and Biden were too timid to seize those assets. This, besides reintegrating Russia to SWIFT. With respect to the first point, the rights the rights over Ukraine resources and infrastructure, the New Deal acknowledge Ukraine's sovereignty over those assets. It has no mention about the Russian reserves, but that's a decision that Europe will have to make anyway. Otherwise, they will have to see how those reserves return to Putin, which will say a lot about their incompetence to act when action is needed. And with respect to the resources and the investment fund created to manage them, the funds this will still be managed by a limited liability company established in Delaware, and Ukraine will receive no guarantees, of course, because those projects can still may not be forcible if Ukraine disappears, but they will if Ukraine turns into Belarus. So Ukraine, of course, has received no guarantees. Yet the most concerning fact is that the more likely way to make this endeavor profitable relies on the destabilization of Ukraine. That's why this deal can work for Ukraine only if it's a tactic to gain time while MERS gathers momentum to rearm Europe, lead an alternative peace process, and hopefully get China on board to cut Putin's lifeline while tackling China's excess capacity to prevent that this excess capacity explodes in a huge depreciation of the yuan. Remember, this problem remains unsolved and is at the core of China's deflation. So, and it will not away by itself. Is their problem, but when they are Miami, China are the second economy in the world, that problem is also our problem. This also would give Democrats a chance to stop playing dead and start rebuking Jake Sullivan's stupid ideas. Only this not caving to Trump's abusive terms will give the USA a chance to reclaim its leadership in 2029. If Democrats come back to power with somebody different from Biden, of course, because if you are a European power, a European leader, and you are afraid that they are going to come back with another Biden, you will have to extract very different considerations and take different action, different kinds of actions as a consequence. It's sad for the welfare of both Ukraine and America that Zelensky has signed this deal. But the fact that this has happened should imprint some sense of urgency in Europe and invite Starmers and Democrats to grow up. But if it is a correct calculation that Trump's ceasefire, which makes the Minsk Accords look like the general agreement on tariffs and trade or the Yalta Conference, will only stimulate future Russian attempts at installing another Yanukovych in Ukraine to expand and to, of course, continue expanding the Georgia model, the model of destabilizing countries through war or through political instability. This also could be a painful but real opportunity to redefine the international order in collaboration with China, an international order that isolates rogues like Putin and Kim Jong-un, but in a more humble way admits that we are not longer in a unilateral order. And having said that, I leave you with our newscast.
Good evening. This is Brian Thomas Simons, and these are the main headlines of this hour. Among other news,
New 166 executive decisions were released in the Oval Office during the weekend. Among them, 1. State Secretary Rubio won't be referred to as Secretary Little Marco or Lil Marco in official White House communications. At the Oval Office presentation, President Trump admitted this was the fourth time an executive decision was issued about this topic at the insistence of the state secretary, but that he couldn't help himself. 2. From now on, Canada and Greenland will be admitted not as states but as territories of the United States. The diminished status was explained by the last Canadian elections and polls in Greenland that implied hostility to the annexation. Asked about the reactions of Canada and Denmark to his decision, President Trump said that it was all Biden's fault. 3. Secretary Little Marco will stay in the Maldives until further notice, but will remain in competition in The Apprentice, White House edition, and be informed of the changes made by DOJ to his department if Elon Musk considers it necessary. Asked whether this decision changed any previous decision, President Trump smiled and declared that it didn't, but that it gave him the chance of calling him Little Marco. Secretary Rubio thanked him for the gesture from the Maldives. B. Senator Schumer to start anger management therapy after his bold threat of sending a strong letter to President Trump. Democratic Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer will have to start anger management therapy as his threat to send a strong letter to President Trump was considered too aggressive by DNC Chair Ken Martin. Our approval has been falling because voters fear we might be too uncivil at some time in the future. If we don't send them a clear signal that we will keep caving to Republicans in the name of bipartisanship, they might never vote for us again, added Chair Martin. C. MSNBC is next media network to cave to President Trump. To atone for Trump's perceived grievances, MSNBC will have to purchase an undisclosed amount of $Trump meme coins, and host Chris Hayes will present the special 32 Days to the Rapture. The special will include segments featuring 1. Senator Schumer's strong letter, 2. Revised predictions of precisely when and in what swing states Jesus will come to get out the vote for the Republican Party, 3. Trailer of Reverend John Hagee's new Left Behind movie, 4. Testimonies of televangelists where they confirm that President Trump, not Jesus Christ, will sit at God's right. Confirm that Stormy Daniels is playing the role of Mary Magdalene in Luke's chapter 25's prophecy that declares that Trump is the new Messiah that will make America great, and that Jesus Christ will come later as his aide. D. Former President Biden's dog commander could find asylum in Canada's embassy after weeks of being tracked by the FBI. As President Trump revoked the pardon granted by his predecessor, the FBI had been hunting him down across the nation to make him accountable for 5 bodies buried in the White House's gardens. President Biden's lawyer claims commander's pardon was valid and all evidence says that at least 2 of the bodies were victims of the president's sons Don Jr. and Eric, who have also been granted pardons. After years of indescribable horror due to Putin's threats, which forced them to appease him in the war in Ukraine and harm their own countries, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and former President Biden still have nightmares about the Russian dictator. In the case of the former American president, off-the-record sources declared that the condition was worsened by top national security advisor Jake Sullivan, who had fun frightening Mr. Biden with stories about escalation. Approached by reporters inquiring if this would affect his spot in the 2028 Harris-Biden ticket, Senator Schumer emphatically denied the rumors. It's precisely that which makes him an authentic Democrat. Asked whether Democrats would not benefit more with somebody stronger, like FDR, the senator declared, "No, FDR was a myth. He was not real, just a tale. He never existed. Never." President Biden once more caught trying to start his second term as he tried to sneak into the White House through the entrance for tourists. A security officer declared off the record that this was the 4th time this had happened. "We have talked to his relatives, but they say that Mr. Biden is dead set convinced of his victory and that he beat Medicare. We have warned them that we have a restraining order already and that we will have to go to a judge if they don't do something about this issue." Former President Biden convokes press conference in his residence to announce his first decision for his second term, which would consist of declaring a Memorial Day to honor his uncle eaten by cannibals and his own victory over Medicare. With Senator Schumer and DNC Chair Ken Martin in attendance, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries declared that change was coming and that this was an excellent way to start the 2028 campaign for the ticket Harris-Biden. Ocasio-Cortez and the Squad decide platform for Ocasio-Cortez's run in 2028 presidential primaries. After days of negotiations, New York Representative Ocasio-Cortez and the other members of the Squad agreed on the points that will spearhead her campaign in the upcoming presidential primaries. 1. The child tax credit will be increased to $5,000, but male beneficiaries will have to prove they have used the Amelia Perez toxic masculinity deconstruction method. If male beneficiaries can't afford the surgery, the federal government will pay for it in the hospital of their choice. 2. Offensive statues will be removed from public places according to a list Black Lives Matter will provide at the end of every fiscal year. 3. Every woke activist will be secured a position as DEI executive or consultant in her administration. Asked about whether Bernie Sanders agreed with the platform, the New York representative declared that he had been removed from the party because he kept talking about money in politics, the Voting Rights Act, unionization, minimum wage, and other boring stuff. He kept talking about oligarchy instead of the patriarchy, so we had to get rid of him, added Representative Rashida Tlaib, also a member of the Squad. Tariffs Czar Peter Navarro and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, dismissing Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent's fears, are preparing a new assessment of the economy, based on alternative facts, after dismissing the unfounded fears sown by Bessent in President Trump. According to this assessment, 1. The economy is great. The economy is beautiful. 2. Only MAGA members will be able to perform the jobs of the future. I must be clear on this. Being a MAGA supporter won't be enough. You must be core MAGA to be able to perform these jobs, added Navarro. 3. Tariffs are great and all countries love them, even China. 4. Immigrants are evil and all countries hate them, even China. 5. Ukraine, understanding that Mr. Zelensky is evil, will embrace President Trump's leadership and accept Putin's choice for their next president. This will start a new century of prosperity for everybody. 6. The working class will be happy to invest their retirements in dollar Trump meme coins. And even workers from foreign countries will demand them, but American workers will have priority. 7. There will never again be recessions or inflation, and everybody will be happy when Trump starts his third term. This will start God's kingdom on earth. After Supreme Court validates the use of doctored photographs using Photoshop as evidence in the Abrego Garcia case, President Trump starts his 2028 campaign doing the same to the foreheads of his likely opponents with words that will remind voters why they didn't vote for them in 2024. Approached by reporters, Senator Schumer declared that he has disagreed with President Trump in another strong letter, especially the part that requires tattooing or branding such words in their actual foreheads, but that, as a Democrat, he will abide by Trump's executive decision because it was his duty to cave to Republicans. Man who stole a cop car while awaiting trial for stealing another cop car joins the Republican Party. Daniel Barton, 34, from Wisconsin, declared that I stole them cop cars because it was my sincere religious belief and because I'm a patriot. His lawyer declared that Barton, as in the case of Jack R. Blank, a man from Adams County, Illinois who, after invoking the sincere religious belief defense used by the January 6 riot defendants, was awarded $100,000 by Adams County, his client has also been awarded a similar amount and that, as in Blank's case, the arresting officers have been put on administrative leave and will have to go through religious sensitivity training.
This has been the news of this hour. sponsored by Church of the Holy Redeemer's Power in the Spirit. Have you accepted Jesus Christ as your personal Savior? Did you vote for Trump in 2016 and then in 2020? This is the right church for you. If so, Church of the Holy Redeemer's Power in the Spirit is the only Christian church that can promise you in the Lord to have 72 virgins in heaven for only a donation of $50 a month. You will have access to those 72 virgins in heaven. For an additional $25, you will be allowed to replace 10 of them, and for $100, Heaven Premium, you will be allowed to choose them for yourself. Guaranteed, if you're not satisfied with those 72 virgins after you die, full refund of your money. We accept Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and Discover.